banks and retail outlets, with trials to include payment via mobile phones and fund transferring. The pilot program will run from August to December and may be expanded into a second phase next year. The central bank says it's taking steps to prepare for changes in the payment settlement system, with the share of cash transactions seeing a significant decrease. Bank of Korea is not alone in trying to develop a central bank-backed digital currency. There are similar moves by central banks from China, Britain, and Sweden. That's to modernize their financial systems. Consumer prices continue to push ahead in Singapore, with core inflation rising by 0.6% in April compared to a year ago. Now, that's the third straight month of increase. Core inflation, excluding a private road transport and accommodation costs. Now, if you include those, the headline consumer price index climbed by 2.1% on year. And that's the fastest pace in almost 7 years, driven mainly by a sharp increase in car prices. Consumers were also paying more for household durables and food. Experts say Singaporeans may expect higher costs as the COVID-19 situation in the region worsens, leading to a supply disruption. That's coupled with the rising COVID-19 infections locally and a potential tightening of restrictions.
If they have to continue to ensure restriction, etc., then they may see some of the costs being passed on to consumer. But again, as I say, that's on the assumption that they don't get further assistance. I think after 1 year, government are quite quick in terms of finding out who are the industry most affected, who needs help, and who doesn't. So we are able to calibrate response far more quickly this time around. So to you and I as consumer, maybe the impact will be far less.
A big surprise from New Zealand, where retail sales unexpectedly rose 2.5% on quarter in Q1. That far exceeded Bloomberg's estimate of a 1.8% decline. The uptick was driven by sales of electronics and outdoor recreational goods. The figure is a key input for its economy. With rising consumer prices and a number of central banks due to announce monetary policy decisions this week, investors are watching to see if ultra-easy monetary policies will be rolled back. We asked one analyst if such fears are warranted.
Central banks don't tend to move that quickly. So if they're now only in a position where they're thinking about removing stimulus, I think they need to see a much longer series of data first that gives them the confidence that they're doing the right thing. The way that I would think about central banks is this. It is very easy for central banks to catch up if they feel they've fallen behind. It is very difficult for them to reverse course if they've gone too early. So the path of least resistance for central banks is to maybe wait and see a little bit longer. So with that, the markets will be very sensitive to comments. But at the same time, I do think central banks will be sitting on their hands now for a number of months, pending a series of data that shows them that things are recovering. Other central banks in the region, it's quite clear that the likes of India, Indonesia, Thailand, for example, markets that generally tend to focus more on domestic consumption as opposed to export. And also, of course, there's a big tourism sector within the region as well. These markets are clearly still struggling with the uptick in COVID cases, and that's going to have an impact, of course, in terms of domestic consumption. So no real chance here of a move in terms of regional central banks anytime soon. So I think it's very much a global story. Things will change slowly, but there is still so much uncertainty out there in terms of restrictions, lockdowns, and economic activity that central banks for now are just happy to take a wait-and-see approach.
Copper prices have been rocketing higher this year, and analysts forecast the rally will continue, the main driver being China's continued recovery from its COVID-19 slump. The benchmark copper price on the London Metal Exchange hit a record high in early May, more than $10,000 a ton, double what it was just a year ago. And prices have remained above that 10,000 mark since. Strategists at Bank of America say copper prices could even jump to 13,000. Investors say copper is turning into an attractive commodity, especially as major countries push for decarbonization. This boosts demand for electric vehicles as well as wind and solar power generation stations. Copper is mainly used to make electric cables and is indispensable to infrastructure builders. China is the world's biggest copper buyer, consuming half the global output. And the impact of the pandemic has done little to soften demand for the red metal, mainly due to China's speedy recovery. In talks with major domestic commodity companies yesterday, China's regulators warned industrial metal companies they must maintain what officials call normal market order. The officials urged them not to drive prices up and warned against collusion. Domestic industrial commodity prices are plunging. Take a look at these numbers from China. The most traded Dalian iron ore futures dropped 5%, copper down by 1.4%, and aluminum hit a one-month low of 18,000 yuan a ton, though it has gained back some of those losses. And that's it for business. Back to you, Otelli.
Thanks, Eugenia. India's fight against the coronavirus spread is complicated by the rise in black fungus cases, or mucormycosis. Health Ministry officials say they are increasing the supply of a drug used to treat the rare infection. India has reported nearly 9,000 cases, and more than 200 people have died. Now, amphotericin B is an antifungal intravenous injection administered every day for up to 8 weeks in patients. Each vial costs between $80 and $100, and patients are prescribed more than one a day. States like Maharashtra and Delhi have been reporting a shortage of the drug. Ishan Garg has more on how severe the black fungus situation is and exactly what doctors plan to do. All right, coming up, we've got plenty more, so stay tuned and on Asia Now.
We're going to be 10 billion people from the current 7 billion in just the next couple of decades.
So little land with so many mouths to feed.
The climate is collapsing. Every day we are facing new challenges.
Asia's food security is at breaking point.
We need to innovate in order to provide sufficient food for people in the world.
There are great challenges in front of us, and only future will tell us how successful we are going to be.
These are the people racing to feed the world.
I would say 80% of them said I was crazy.
Itu diwujudkan saat semester akhir kuliah.
तो हमने सोचा कि ये हमारा एक टेक्नोलॉजी को रियल टाइम है जब मार्केट में लाने के लिए, और बस वही पॉइंट था हमारे लिए.
It's first catch the meat produced in China. That's magic.
Do I want to come to a situation where my children are going to ask me, so you knew all of these stats, yet you haven't done anything about it?
Race to Feed the World, premiering 31st of May, Monday on CNA.
Biodiversity is booming, which is inviting for some local foragers and farmers who embrace edible wildlife.
We're the largest organic banana grower in Singapore.
This is a gem.
Amazing. So the mulberries are from the garden.
No, that's delicious.
Singapore is ramping up conservation efforts locally and across the region.
I really do love reptiles and finding out about them, so I really love my job.
Building must relate to the lives of the people.
目前还是一直要创新一些新的东西。我也不希望是人家把我看作是80岁的人。
There are those who dare to be different, who have made their mark in Singapore and beyond.
You have such big dreams, you want to change the world with your art.
Obviously, every fighter wants to win, so all you can do is to prepare yourself to win.
From the top stories in Asia.
A quicker, portable way of testing for COVID-19 in just 5 minutes.
To breaking news in the US and Europe.
US President-elect Joe Biden is set to formally introduce his top economic team.
With an eye on markets opening across the world.
Wall Street's major indices all closed the month with double-digit percentage gains.
It's the one bulletin that offers you a global perspective. World Tonight, daily, on CNA.
Malaysia is seeing what many are calling a new dawn. I'm here to make sense of these changes taking place and bring you stories from a country that's charting a new direction for its future. Let's go. CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
Updating this hour's top stories. A defiant message from Myanmar's ousted leader on